Chainsaw Man is not a Gunnar anime, and I need you all to stop treating it like it is. You know what the disease is in this fandom? The disease is the people who seem to lack any and all media literacy and are getting out of the Chainsaw Man story something that they should not be getting out of it at all, because it's actually a very complex and dark story about a victim of SA abuse and control. And yet somehow what y'all want to focus on is how you would want Makima to put a leash on you and walk you like a dog. Well, how about you sacrifice yourself to do that instead of trying to live vicariously through Denji, who's literally a victim in this entire situation? Because when I tell you, I took so long to get into this anime because the things I was seeing online just made it seem like there was nothing in it for me. First and foremost, I kept seeing cosplayers dressing up as Makima and Denji, and again, recreating that same scenario I just gave you an example of, walking him like a little dog. And something told me that something was off here, that this is not really what we should be doing. And now, having actually watched the anime and read the manga, I cannot fathom why any of you would want to do that. I cannot fathom why there's so many men in particular who watch this anime and live in such envy of the literal violence that is committed against Denji time and time again by the women that he meets. But anyway, hi, I'm Natalie. I talk anime, manga, and bookish things here. And as you can see, I have very passionate things to say about the Chainsaw Man anime. So for anyone who has stumbled across this rant and has no actual idea what Chainsaw Man is about, well, it's about Denji, who has grown up in poverty and in isolation and has been forced to do violent work in order to survive, in order to try to keep a roof over his head and food in his stomach. And eventually, he makes a connection, a deal, whatever you want to call it, with a devil in order to stay alive. And ever since making that connection, he suddenly becomes the interest of many, many people, including Makima, who works for an agency that tries to get rid of devils in the world. And so we follow him as he joins the agency to fight devils and develops an unhealthy obsession with Makima. Now, what I love about Chainsaw Man is Denji. Frankly, I came out of the first season of the anime only giving a shit about Denji and power. Everyone else I found disgusting, repulsive, and I couldn't have cared less if they all dropped dead. Now, why do I have such strong negative feelings towards nearly every character in Chainsaw Man? Well, it's quite simple. It's because most of them treat Denji with derision, disrespect, and like he's worse than shit underneath their shoe. And I have problems with that, because if there's a type of character that I love and I will defend with a passion, is a character that comes from unfortunate circumstances and is therefore marked as unintelligent and useless, but naturally that is not their fault. And Denji falls squarely into that. Everyone just wants to treat him like the biggest idiot on earth. But pray tell, why do we think he acts the way he does? Why do we think he lacks the intelligence that you think he should have? Maybe it's because he didn't get an education. Maybe it's because he grew up without parents. Maybe it's because the only people he's interacted with only want to get something out of him and not to give him anything in return. So with that in mind, how was I supposed to like Aki, who, again, spends a good chunk of time just treating Denji like he's the scum of the earth? And sure, they end up developing a more positive relationship, which is why when other events end up happening, I do feel for Aki. But at the end of the day, if we have a hierarchy, Aki doesn't even touch anywhere close to Denji and power. And Pochita, because who couldn't love Pochita? Apart from just Aki, we have other characters like Makima and Himeno that play a significant role in season 1 of Chainsaw Man. And they're literally the reason why, while watching the first season, I multiple times had to take breaks because I was getting so upset watching what they were doing to Denji that it made me sick. I needed a moment to breathe or I was going to explode. I literally watched, I'm pretty sure, the first season of Chainsaw Man still in one day, but I took multiple breaks where I was screaming at my friends about the injustice of everything happening to Denji. So let's focus on Makima first, since she is so important to the storyline. I want you all to remember and never forget that Makima is one of the central antagonists of this series. I think some of y'all forget that, but she's literally an antagonist. And now listen, under most circumstances, I can understand having a character like Makima as your favorite character. I'm a big fan of villains and antagonists in storylines. I often find myself very compelled by them. Like, I literally have a Light Yagami tattoo, and most people despise his guts. I can understand liking an unlikable, despicable character. But I need some of y'all to have some discernment, okay? You can like Makima, but I need you to at least acknowledge that she's awful. If you are just like drooling over her with nothing else going on up here, I need you to stop. Because all the villains I love them in full awareness of how awful they are. So why is Makima such a despicable human being? Well, it's quite simple, because Makima only interacts with people in order to use them to her advantage. Makima couldn't give less of a fuck about anyone, about literally anyone. Denji is not special at all in these circumstances. If anything, she is more than willing to exploit the loneliness that Denji feels in order to gain control over him. Because like the big thing people like to focus on when they talk about Denji is how obsessed he is with like tits and sex and whatnot. But the literal reason he's so obsessed with that is because he yearns for intimacy. What Denji actually wants in his life is to feel intimacy with someone, to finally have someone genuinely and deeply care about him and him be able to return those feelings. And Makima is in full awareness of this desire that is what's actually driving Denji. And so she's willing to dangle in front of him the only thing that he can understand, because Denji doesn't know that what he wants is intimacy, that what he wants is a serious connection with another human being. He can't comprehend that, which is why he's often so confused by the desires and the impulses of his body. He can only comprehend them in a simple way because, again, he has no framework for anything else. If you have no framework of how a healthy relationship with another human should be, regardless of whether it's romantic or not, then of course you're just going to be driven by your impulses. And as a literal teenager with raging hormones, naturally, he's just going to assume that what he really wants is, when that is not the end all be all of what he's actually trying to get out of life. And so Makima drives me insane because time and time and time again, she just takes advantage of him. And literally the inappropriate touching that she does to this teenage boy. If Makima was real, I would need to be institutionalized because I would want to rip her to shreds. But that's that on Makima. Frankly, we could say more, but I fear that if I try to go too deep into it, I'm just gonna send myself into a rage spiral, so I'd rather stop. Let's move on to Himeno, who also pisses me off because so many of y'all as well have Himeno as one of your favorite characters. And I'm just speechless. Like, first of all, the woman is barely in this series. Season 1, she's already gone. I'm like, why do we have this obsession with her? The woman is literally a PDF file and an abuser, a committer of violence in nature. And Himeno's a repeat offender in a different way from Makima, because again, Makima is just foul to the bone, to the core. Like, there's nothing good about Makima at all. Himeno still has some humanity to her. She is presented in a very, I guess you could say, humane way, which is what makes it even more sick that not only does she encourage and foment this very questionable relationship with Aki that thankfully never goes fucking anywhere, but then she literally vomits in Denji's mouth, which he's compelled to swallow, and everyone's just laughing about this like it's a joke, but it gets worse than that. What's worse than that is that then she takes him to her apartment to literally put his hands on him while he's completely shit-faced. And it's one of the most harrowing things I've ever seen. And some of y'all have the audacity to be like, man, I wish I was Denji. You wish you were being assaulted. That's what you're telling me. Please seek therapy. Seek help, because you don't seem to understand the gravity of what's being done to Denji by multiple characters. I genuinely felt so much relief and peace when that bitch died. I was so happy. I was like, thank you. One less foul human being on this earth. Okay, I'm gonna try to center myself so I can talk about why I still love this series. Which, like, I feel like my passion might make it seem like I hate it, but no, I just hate the people that don't understand it, that are engaging with it in a way that's frankly illogical to me, because I do find it such an interesting storyline to follow Denji, as basically he's just going through a series of unfortunate events and is trying to reach the goal of an actually happy life, but everything just gets in his way. Which is where we can now talk about the movie that just came out. I literally watched it probably by the time this video is posting last weekend, and I loved it. I love the Reze arc because it's the perfect amalgamation of everything that I love about Chainsaw Man and what I feel like people need to see about it, about what's actually compelling. Because in the Reze arc, Denji meets Reze, and in the movie, quite literally, I would say at least about half of it almost plays like a romance movie, because Denji is just going through this internal struggle of he really likes Makima, which, as we've established, is a problem. And he meets Reze, who seems to be a girl his age who shows healthy and kind interest in him. And so he's having to deal with this inner turmoil of like, why am I developing feelings for this other girl when all this time I've only been interested really in Makima? This is like a betrayal of Makima, but he cannot help but feel more and more pulled in towards Reze, because Reze, at least, you know, to begin with, is actually showing him the kindness and sweetness that he actually deserves. It's part of what's so heartbreaking about it all, because Reze also starts pointing out how sad Denji's life has been and still is. She starts emphasizing how, as a 16-year-old, he should be going to school. He should be learning. He should be making friends his age. He should be having fun. And instead, he's working for this government agency that sure provides him with food, provides him with a roof over his head, but is not actually trying to give him more than the bare essentials. If you actually care about a person, you're supposed to try to build up their character, their education, all of these other things. And they're not doing that at all because they don't actually care about him as a person. And of course, ultimately, this also just ends up in another betrayal, because Reze also is just after Chainsaw Man's heart. She doesn't actually care about Denji and is just interacting with him in order to gain his trust. Now, the argument could also be made that ultimately she does actually end up caring about him, even if just a little bit, because at the end it's established that she's also basically just a kid who was experimented on and in essence sent on this mission. And so there is this notion that there still might be a heart in her. You know, she might not just be a monster, but it still doesn't stop her from literally trying to kill Denji. At the end of the day, she still ends up being like, well, actually, we cannot run away together. We cannot resolve this in a way that's like happily ever after for everybody, because Makima already has her claws in you. And regardless, this is just a problem. Everything here is just a problem. And so that whole thing was just so sad to me, because ultimately what I want for Denji is for him to have a peaceful life with a loving and caring partner, and to get away from all these sick people that keep finding him and only want him because of the bond that he made with Pochita. It's just, it breaks my heart. And I'm someone who loves a tragedy, loves to suffer, which is why I love Chainsaw Man so much, because it's like, I know what I want for Denji's future, and I'm not convinced he's going to get it. And it just makes me feel something, you know? And that's what I want out of a story. I want to feel something for the characters. Beyond that, I'm not going to lie, when it comes to the animation of the first season of Chainsaw Man and the movie, they both have really engaging and nice to look at action sequences. Like, the movie has this long ass fight scene that I was glued to the screen. I could not look away. I was like, this looks so awesome. It's deranged because the fighting that goes on in Chainsaw Man is absolutely deranged. It's part of why I'm now back in the camp of like, I can only watch the animation of it. I can't read it, because when I read the manga, I was like, I literally don't know what's happening here. I cannot understand what is happening, but once they animate it, it's actually so crisp and clear and so badass. I was like, I can actually appreciate this. This is beautiful and disgusting. So yeah, I legitimately love Chainsaw Man. It just has so many interesting characters, even if most of them I hate. But yeah, I just love Chainsaw Man so much. I really wish the movie had more of Power, because I adore Power. Like, I understand why she wasn't really there, because she wasn't in the manga either. She wasn't central to that arc, but the relationship, the friendship that she and Denji develop is just so sweet in a feral and unhinged way, because neither of them have been properly socialized, and so they act kind of deranged, but it's clear that they actually grow to care for one another and find comfort in each other and companionship. And it's just, I wish Denji had even more of that. I wish he did, even if it's other feral characters, which includes Beam. Beam in the Chainsaw Man movie was the real MVP, actually. He was actually Denji's #1 hype man and #1 protector, too. He was such a ride or die for Denji in that entire movie. I was like, Beam, you're literally carrying this movie on your back. Without you, we would be nothing. We would be nothing without you. You are also low-key deranged, but that's okay. That's okay. We love you anyway. That's fine. It's fine. So anyway, I think that's most of what I have to say about this anime. I'm sure my thoughts were all over the place, but frankly, I turned on this camera with only 3 bullet points. Number 1 being that some of the Chainsaw Man cosplayers are weird. Not all of them. Some of y'all, first of all, have iconic cosplays that look amazing. The way some of y'all dressed up to see the Chainsaw Man movie, impeccable, frankly. So that's why it's some of them. The other point being denji must be protected at all costs. And the third point being makima can rot in hell. I feel like I covered all those bases and anything else was just extra. So feel free to come into the comments and either agree, disagree, add more points to what I'm saying. I welcome any and all thoughts, and I'm not afraid to tussle in the comments either. So that's it for today's video.